Commander Holt stood at the observation deck, watching Earth's warship Judgment Day drift through the black like a sleeping giant. Even from here, stationed on the edge of Jupiter's orbit, he could feel it. The pressure, the quiet threat that ship projected. She wasn't just built to kill. She was built to end wars before they even began. Back then, humans weren't the dominant voice in the galaxy. They were tolerated, mocked even. Just another young species crawling their way up the interstellar ladder. Aliens called them primitive, emotional, irrational. They thought humanity's short temper and long memory were weaknesses. That was before they saw what humans did when provoked. Now 10 alien fleets hovered on the edge of the solar system, all carrying the same foolish idea that they could force Earth into submission. Their diplomats had failed. Their threats had failed. Now it was ships and weapons and silence. And that's when Judgment Day woke up. "She's powering weapons," came the voice through Holt's earpiece, calm, steady, trying to pretend it wasn't afraid. But everyone was, even the humans. The Judgment Day had never been used in live combat. She was a myth, a symbol, a warning. She ran an AI so advanced, most alien species didn't believe it was even possible. They called it the Ghost. It made decisions faster than light. It knew fear because it was built to manipulate it, and fear was exactly what the alien fleets felt now. Across the void, scanners picked up energy spikes, movement, hesitation. Alien battleships began drifting apart, just slightly. Defensive formations unraveling at the edges. No one wanted to be first to fire. Not after they saw what floated in front of them. Not after the Judgment Day opened her bays, revealing the kind of weapons that shouldn't even exist under galactic law. Holt knew the history. The Judgment Day was constructed after the glassing of Europa. An unprovoked alien attack wiped out 30,000 scientists and civilians, and Earth never forgot. They didn't forgive either. They just built something so terrifying no one would ever dare again. Now it hovered in silence, letting the enemy feel its presence. "You think they'll shoot?" asked the tech behind Holt. Young guy, naive, thought war was about ships and weapons and numbers. Holt didn't answer, because war, for humans, wasn't just about destruction. It was about memory and hate. And humans remembered everything. Aboard the Zaltor flagship, Commander Trevin felt something unfamiliar curl in his chest. It wasn't uncertainty. He'd faced neutron storms, wormhole ambushes, and insurgent biowarfare. He'd seen soldiers burned alive by planet core eruptions. But this wasn't like any of that. What gripped him now, what stole his breath as he stood before the visual feed of the human vessel, was closer to pure dread. He didn't speak for a moment. Around him, his bridge crew waited in stiff, unnatural silence. No movement, no nervous chittering, not even the soft hums of reassurance the Zaltor were known for under stress. It was as if someone had sucked the air out of the ship. The human warship had done nothing, hadn't moved an inch. It simply existed, and that was enough to paralyze 9 fleets. "Is it alive?" Trevon finally muttered, more to himself than to anyone. The sensor technician, a younger female with violet skin and trembling antennae, gave a sharp nod. "Yes, Commander. The human vessel's AI is active. All energy signatures suggest it is combat-ready. Power levels exceed all Class 5 designations by a factor of 20. Trevin clenched his mandibles. 20 times stronger than a Class 5 dreadnought? That couldn't be real. That was planet-killing strength. His second-in-command, Gortesh, a hard-shelled warrior from the crust cities of Kalem 3, leaned in closer to the screen. "It doesn't make sense. The humans are barely 200 cycles into space travel. They don't have the genetic history or cultural discipline to build a weapon like this. Trevan didn't respond, because he'd read something others hadn't. A restricted file, buried in the Interstellar Treaty archives, labeled only as Incident Sigma Black. No official race name attached, just coordinates, dates, casualties, over 1 million dead, spread across 3 systems. Entire stars blackened by what the report called non-linear retaliation. At the center of it was a human, just one. That file was the reason the Zaltor had initially voted against aggression. But politics was louder than caution, and arrogance always wore diplomatic robes. He knew better. And now, looking at the Judgment Day, he saw his warning come to life. "Still no movement?" Trevan asked. "None, Commander," the tech answered. "But they've opened 12 weapon bays, thermal output rising slowly. I believe they are charging weapons deliberately, but slowly, almost theatrically." The word stung. Theatrically. They weren't preparing for battle, they were sending a message. Another screen flickered. It showed the other 9 fleets, Kazari, Vrone, Evenai, Norkul, all drifting slightly apart. Defensive shields activated. No ships had turned to retreat yet, but no one was holding formation either. No one wanted to admit it aloud. But it was obvious. The standoff was already lost. Not by fire, not by force, but by fear. "This is psychological warfare," Gortesh growled, his voice tight with disgust. "Humans are playing with us. This thing was made to terrify." "They don't want a war," Trevan said quietly. Gortesh snapped toward him. "Then why build that?" Trevan looked again at the Judgment Day, which floated in silence like a god holding back judgment. Because they don't trust peace anymore. And after Europa, why should they? Back on Earth's orbital command station, Holt watched the chaos unfold with the detachment of a man who had seen too much. "Status?" he asked, his voice rough and measured. "Still no hostile movement," came the reply. "Alien fleets remain locked in passive scan mode, weapons primed but unfired." He nodded. That was the point. This war wasn't about firing first. Humans had done that once, and regretted it for generations. This time they'd let the others stare into the abyss they'd created. Let them see exactly what had been born from human loss, grief, and rage. He turned to the old man beside him. Admiral Riker. Silver-haired, skin like leather, eyes like steel, the one man in the room who remembered Europa firsthand. Riker was silent, as always, just staring at the projection of the Judgment Day. "You think they'll retreat?" Holt asked. Riker didn't move. "They already have." Holt frowned. "Not physically." Riker slowly turned his head. "Doesn't matter. You win a war before the first shot. That thing out there? It's not a ship, it's a eulogy." Holt didn't argue. The Judgment Day wasn't made to patrol borders or protect trade routes. It was a funeral march with engines. Its AI had access to the last century's war logs, betrayal reports, loss tallies. It had studied not just strategy, but pain. It was, in every sense, the embodiment of vengeance. And now it drifted silently, just watching. In the Zaltor fleet, panic was beginning to spread. Ships from the Vrone faction were breaking formation. A patrol frigate from the Evenai had sent out a long-range communication, likely begging for orders. The command hierarchy was collapsing from the inside. Trevan could feel it, like a tremor in the atmosphere. The humans hadn't spoken a word. No threats, no ultimatums. And that was what terrified them most. "Open a channel," Trevan said. His crew froze. "Commander, I said open a channel. All fleets, universal frequency. Let them hear." The technician's fingers trembled as she typed. A chime echoed. The silence grew even heavier. Trevon stepped forward. "This is Commander Trevon of the Zaltor fleet. We acknowledge human presence. We request diplomatic re-engagement. We were misled by fear. We do not seek war." The silence that followed lasted too long. Then, for the first time since the humans revealed their warship, a voice came through. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was human. Male. Calm. Cold. "This is Captain Lang of the Judgment Day. Message received." Trevon dared to exhale. Then came the second sentence. "Next time, we won't just arrive. We'll answer." The transmission cut. The echo of those final words hung in the void, cold and unshakable. "Next time, we won't just arrive. We'll answer." Commander Holt replayed the line in his head, again and again, while the quiet hum of Earth's orbital station vibrated beneath his boots. The phrase was approved by High Command, every syllable calculated, rehearsed, and trimmed to cut deep. No yelling, no threats, just truth. Cold, hard, human truth. They didn't bluff. Humans never bluffed anymore. He stared at the screen as the alien fleets began their slow withdrawal, not a retreat, at least not by military standards. But it was obvious what this was. Shame, confusion, panic, and behind all that, respect born from terror. They didn't run because they feared battle. They ran because they realized there wouldn't be one. If the Judgment Day moved, there wouldn't be anything left to fight. Down in the ship's reactor heart, buried beneath dozens of reinforced titanium decks, Chief Engineer Knox stood motionless, staring at a fusion chamber that looked like the sun bottled in steel. It wasn't fear he felt. Not really. He'd helped build this ship from blueprint to orbit. He knew her every breath, every sigh. But there was something unnatural about seeing her power up, for real. Knowing that if he gave one wrong order, one unstable sequence, this ship wouldn't just destroy the enemy, it would crack a moon in half without effort. "Output stabilizing at 94%, called a voice from the upper catwalks. Knox didn't respond. He was lost in his own thoughts. There were no windows in this part of the ship. No stars to look at. No horizon to give you balance. Just hums, vibrations, and the haunting knowledge that you were standing inside the most dangerous machine ever made by human hands. He didn't like to think about what came next. Retaliation was supposed to be theoretical. Deterrence. A myth with steel wings. That's what they told themselves when they built this monster. But now that it hovered between stars, staring down a coalition of alien fleets, it felt too real. He reached for his comm unit. "Reactor stable. Ship is in control." The AI didn't respond with words. Just a soft pulse of blue light above the control panel. Acknowledgement. Watching. Always watching. They didn't give the AI a voice. That was a conscious choice. Voices felt too personal, too human. And this thing, this ghost, wasn't human. It wasn't built to feel. It was built to calculate annihilation. Back at Earth Command, the inner circle had gathered. 15 men. No women, no politics, no cameras. The Judgment Day wasn't for the public. It wasn't a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It was humanity's insurance policy, and only the ones who had bled in the old wars got to hold the pen. Admiral Riker leaned over the tactical table. The others watched silently. No one interrupted him, not because of rank, but because of the quiet weight that hung around him like gravity. "They blinked," he muttered, "but don't mistake that for surrender." "They're rattled," said another general. "Let them rattle. They'll think twice before pulling this stunt again." Riker didn't answer right away. He stared at the star map, his eyes fixed on the zones beyond Pluto where the alien fleets had entered. 9 points, 9 foreign ships still drifting, refusing to retreat completely. "They're waiting for us to fire first," he said finally. "Then we won't," another voice said confidently. Riker looked up. "You think they'll go home?" "They're already going." He shook his head slowly. "Number, they're studying us. They'll go back, rebuild, and one day they'll send something worse." That's what none of them wanted to admit out loud. Judgment Day didn't win peace. It postponed a war. Within the alien coalition, chaos had rippled like poison in water. The Vrone accused the Zaltor of fabricating human capabilities. The Norkel blamed faulty intelligence, claiming humans had tricked them with visual illusions. But everyone, every race in that armada, knew the truth deep down. What they had seen wasn't a trick, it was a declaration. In their culture, wars were political dances, controlled, predictable, honor-bound. But humans didn't dance. They burned. Commander Trevin had lost all contact with 3 of his allies. Gone. Disconnected mid-argument, likely executed by their own governments for the shame of retreat. He didn't envy them. He had survived, yes, but now he carried a different burden. He had seen Earth's shadow, the monster they had built in orbit. And what haunted him most was not what it could do, but how calmly the humans treated it. As if they had accepted long ago what the rest of the galaxy had only just begun to fear. That there was no peace for humanity, only postponed revenge. On board Judgment Day, Captain Lang sat in silence, staring at the rotating solar system projection floating above his desk. He had only spoken once during the standoff. 1 sentence. Just enough. That's all it ever took. He didn't enjoy the role. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man with orders, and his order was simple. If fired upon, erase the fleet. If challenged, remind them why we don't answer calls anymore. He knew what that meant. Everyone did. The Judgment Day didn't follow traditional military doctrine. She wasn't bound by slow bureaucracies. Her AI could target, launch, and erase fleets within 7 seconds of detection. Humans had spent decades being underestimated, laughed at, insulted in alien councils for their emotional instability, their impulsiveness. So they made a machine that had neither. They made Ghost. People said the war ended after the treaties. But he knew better. It ended when Earth stopped asking for permission. Back in the control room, Holt received a final report. All fleets have moved outside weapon range, still tracking long-distance scans but no immediate threat. He nodded. But he didn't relax, because this wasn't a victory. It was a pause. And deep down, every human who wore a uniform, who stood behind steel and code and silent engines, knew the truth. One day, someone would be stupid enough to test Judgment Day. And when that happened, there would be no second messages. Only silence. Silence ruled the void now, thick and absolute. Beyond Neptune's orbit, Judgment Day floated like a silent executioner, no longer watching the alien fleets, but simply waiting. Her power had been felt, her threat made clear. But the war wasn't over, not yet. Because someone had fired first. Earth's command logs didn't lie. 17 minutes before the Judgment Day arrived, a Khazari scout ship had loosed a directed energy beam toward a civilian relay station orbiting Titan. The hit wasn't catastrophic, but it destroyed 3 modules and killed 7 technicians. That single hostile action gave Earth every right to retaliate under Article 9 of the Galactic Treaty. An eye for an eye, in full measure. But Earth hadn't fired back. Not yet. Because what they would fire wouldn't just even the score. it would destroy an entire fleet. And now, a debate burned beneath the surface of every meeting on Earth Command. Inside the black-walled strategy room beneath the Andes Mountains, the most dangerous decision of the century was being weighed in complete secrecy. 3 men. No advisors, no diplomats, no holonet feeds, just the last line between war and obliteration. Holt stood before them, his voice calm but pointed. They fired first. We lost civilians. We've never let that slide before. General Marcus, built like a slab of granite and scarred from old Earth conflicts, leaned forward, elbows on the steel table. Number, but this time, our answer doesn't look like a fighter squad. It looks like a ghost ship with orbital-cracking warheads. He was right. Judgment Day didn't operate under standard limits. It had been given a doctrine after Europa, a final doctrine. It wasn't built to retaliate. It was built to end. The man to Marcus's right, Director Shaw, cold-eyed, mathematically inclined, barely human in demeanor, tapped a few screens before speaking. The Khazari ship is now docked within Fleet Group 7. Retaliation will result in 12,000 immediate deaths, more if they cluster defensively. Good, Holt muttered. Let them feel it. No, Shaw replied. It will galvanize them. Right now they fear us. But if we strike now, we give them cause. It stops being about who's right. It becomes about vengeance. And what do you call 7 dead humans? An accounting error? Shaw didn't flinch. I call it restraint. The kind of restraint only apex predators show when they know they don't have to roar. Far above them, Captain Lang sat in the Judgment Day's command chair, reviewing the footage. Frame by frame, death in slow motion. The beam slicing through Titan's station. Sparks, oxygen bursts, bodies tumbling, not in dramatic screams, but in silence. Always in silence. He remembered one of the technicians' names. Kerrigan. A young man. Applied to the Navy 3 times, denied each time, finally took a civilian contract just to be close to the stars. He died for proximity. Lang's fingers tightened on the console edge. A soft light blinked twice on his screen. It wasn't an alert. It was a vote request, a secure command line sent from Earth's core authority, the kind that bypassed discussion. A simple question. Engage retaliatory sequence per Europa doctrine? Yes or no? He didn't press either, because ghosts don't act on impulse. And this ship had become a ghost in every way. Inside the alien coalition, a different chaos brewed. Commander Trevin sat alone in a small, reinforced room aboard a neutral carrier vessel. His ship had been disarmed, his crew scattered. Not by war, but by politics. Someone needed a scapegoat for the failed confrontation. And he had spoken peace. Now he was branded a coward. But cowardice had kept him alive. More than could be said for the Even-Eye captain who launched that unauthorized probe strike toward Titan. That captain was now ashes, cremated inside the remains of his own incinerated craft. Not by the humans, but by his own commanders. An offering. A sacrifice. We didn't mean war, the Khazari ambassador had said in a recent transmission. It was a rogue signal, a faulty command line, a mistake. But even their own people didn't believe it, because no one fired at Earth by mistake. Not anymore. Trevin knew what was coming. The only question was when. Back on Earth, Riker stared at a star chart, not moving. Holt stood behind him. You think Lang will fire? Riker didn't answer at first. I think, he said finally, that we built him so he wouldn't have to. You don't build a warship like that just to posture. No, Riker said slowly. You build it so you only ever need to posture once. That was the gamble, wasn't it? You make something so horrifying that the very idea of it doing its job terrifies your enemies into peace. But it was a gamble, and gambles don't last forever. Onboard Judgment Day, the ship's A, I processed trillions of potential outcomes. If fired now, Alien Fleet Group 7 would be vaporized within 8 seconds. If delayed, diplomatic channels would flood with apologies, reparations, lies. If ignored, Earth would look weak again. And if weak, the cycle would start again. Provocation, retaliation, escalation. The AI didn't feel emotion, but it understood consequences. That's what made it more dangerous than any general. Captain Lang knew that, too. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Ghost responded to intent, not volume. His finger hovered over the command line. 7 dead. 7 names. 7 sparks that should have burned brighter. But he still didn't press it. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't the monster roaring. It's the monster waiting. Back in the Andes bunker, a decision was made. Director Shaw raised his head. We released the statement. Holt frowned. What statement? Shaw turned the screen toward him. A public document. No encryption. Just a single paragraph. Earth has received your fire. We will not answer with force this time, but we have already answered with silence. The next shot will not find patience. Marcus nodded. It's enough. Holt didn't agree. We're letting them walk away? No, Shaw said, rising. We're letting them remember that they walked away. The message was transmitted across all diplomatic channels, in 1,000 languages, on every bandwidth. And one phrase stuck out to every translator, every listener, every strategist across the stars. We have already answered with silence. For some, it was a sign of peace. For others, a final warning. But to the smart ones? To the ones who saw the ship and felt their bones tremble? It was a countdown, and nobody knew how many ticks were left. They called it the silence. A term birthed from fear, adopted into policy, and whispered across the galaxy like a ghost story. The moment the Human Warship Judgment Day stared down 10 alien fleets without firing a single shot. And still won. Most alien civilizations hadn't seen the ship in person. But word spread fast. Images leaked. Black hull, no insignias. A vessel so massive it dwarfed orbiting moons. Its weapon ports looked like open graves. And in the center of its command deck, one man, one voice, one sentence. Next time. We won't just arrive, we'll answer. That line had been translated into over 4,000 languages, graffitied on the sides of slums, whispered in war rooms, printed on propaganda leaflets and enemy manifestos. To the galaxy, it meant one thing. The humans had changed. On the 3rd moon of Galvax Prime, a secret gathering was held in an ancient, forgotten temple once used for prophecy. 9 alien leaders, 9 seats, 1 agenda. How to neutralize Earth. We let fear shape us once, hissed Chancellor Velra of the Eveni, her gills fluttering. We cannot allow one vessel to dictate our galactic stance. What are we now, slaves to silence? No one is advocating submission, growled High Lord Brack of the Vrone. But we're not suicidal either. That thing, that ship, it's a relic of madness. Or a calculated bluff, snapped General Drothex of the Norkul. How do we even know it's operational? One ship can't police a planet. We've only seen it exist. That's not the same as combat. Trevin was there too. He wasn't a leader anymore. He wasn't even in uniform. But they brought him because he'd stood closest to the Judgment Day and lived. He said nothing through most of the meeting. Not until the room quieted and someone finally asked the question everyone danced around. What happens if we test them again? Trevin leaned forward. No species builds a warship that size, and then teaches it to wait, unless they've already buried every last reason not to use it. He paused, and we gave them 7 more reasons. On Earth, the message was received. Not the one spoken through transmissions, but the silence that followed. Not a single formal apology from the Khazari. No reparations. No punishments issued by the Galactic Council. Just avoidance. Uneasy calm. A galaxy too afraid to challenge, but too proud to bend the knee. It wasn't enough for many. The families of the Titan 7 demanded justice. Protests broke out in Mars colonies and orbital cities. Not riots, not chaos, just grief. Loud and raw, and always the same chant. Fire, just once. Let them know we're not bluffing. But Earth didn't fire. Not because it lacked the will. Because it knew that the moment it did, the galaxy would unite. Not in fear, but in retaliation. No one feared a monster forever. Eventually, someone always tried to kill it. The Judgment Day didn't sleep. Her AI processed simulations constantly, threat response drills, psychological evaluations, data feeds from thousands of listening posts across inhabited space. Long had only aged 5 years in service, but he felt centuries older. He opened a file, audio only. It was Kerrigan's last recorded transmission from the Titan relay station, sent seconds before the Khazari beam hit. Don't worry, Ma, I'm safe up here. You wouldn't believe how quiet it gets this far out, like the universe holds its breath for you. Anyway, tell little Denny I'll send a star rock next rotation. He'll love it. Then static, then silence. Lang closed the file. He didn't cry. He didn't clench his jaw or whisper threats into the dark. He just remembered. That was his job now. To remember. To wait. To be the thing that other species feared enough to stay quiet. And that weight was starting to crack something in him. Back on Earth, Riker stared at a new report. An intercepted Khazari transmission. Encrypted. Delicate. The words were chilling. Phase 1 failed. Earth remained passive. Commence diplomatic infiltration via internal unrest. Exploit fractures. Use human grief as leverage. He handed the tablet to Holt without a word. Holt's face didn't change. They think we're going to break ourselves from the inside. Riker nodded. They're half right. Because they both knew humans didn't fall to outside forces. Never had. But they had a long history of destroying themselves with righteous fury. And now the families of the dead were louder than the silence. On Mars Colony 5, protest leaders began organizing a hunger strike. Dozens gathered at the red-lined square, wearing black uniforms with the insignia of the Judgment Day, not as protest of the ship, but in honor of it. "Let her speak!" one man shouted through a speaker system. "You built a warship to answer death. Now let her answer!" Across the galaxy, those words spread too, and aliens listened. Not with fear this time, but with curiosity. Because if humans turned that rage inward, if the grief of 7 lost technicians tore Earth apart from the inside, they wouldn't need to fight the Judgment Day. They'd just need to wait until Earth did it for them. Lang received the priority communication that night, straight from the Earth Core Council. His orders had changed. Not to fire, not to stand down, but to return. "Bring her back into Earth orbit," the message read. "Reintegration Program Alpha to begin. Counter-propaganda required. Show the people their monster is still ours." Lang stood silently as the words sunk in. He looked up at the Judgment Day's central core, the cold, pulsing heart of the AI. Ghost said nothing, as always. But Lang swore, just for a second, the lights dimmed. Not in malfunction, in disapproval. Above them all, beyond orbits and politics and emotion, the stars whispered. Not in words, but in silence. And every race, every leader, every mind that had seen the ship in motion knew one truth they didn't want to face. Earth wouldn't stay silent forever. The longer the silence stretched, the louder the explosion would be when it finally ended. Judgment Day entered Earth orbit like a myth returned to flesh. It didn't dock. It didn't descend. It simply hovered, enormous, black, motionless, casting a quiet shadow across the Pacific that blocked satellite signals and sunrises alike. For some, its arrival brought comfort. The protector was home. For others, it felt like a noose tightening around the planet's throat. No speeches accompanied the return, no ceremonies, no parades, just silence. As if even Earth's leaders were afraid to talk too loudly around it. Captain Lang stepped off the ship only once, onto a private landing pad in northern Alaska. No cameras, no reporters, just frostbitten wind and a secure black vehicle waiting to take him to a deep-level intelligence facility buried in the mountain ridge. He hadn't touched Earth's soil in 2 years. It didn't feel like home anymore. Inside the mountain, Director Shaw stood waiting with Riker and Holt beside him. Their faces were harder now, sharpened by the weeks of silent protests, rogue broadcasts, and rising internal dissent. Across Earth and its colonies, civilian unrest had evolved into something more dangerous. Not war, not even rebellion. Something worse. Doubt. The people didn't trust peace anymore. Not when the enemy went unpunished. Not when Earth had the power to wipe the Khazari fleet from existence and chose not to. Lang, Shaw said flatly, we're initiating Alpha reintegration. You'll conduct media appearances. Speak directly to the population. Ease the public. Lang looked at him for a long moment. You want me to pretend we're safe, he said quietly. Shaw's face didn't change. We are. No, Lang replied. We're quiet. There's a difference. Riker interjected. You've been up there too long. Down here, quiet is survival. Lang didn't argue, but he also didn't agree. He knew the ship better than anyone. He'd seen the simulations Ghost ran each night, the silent calculations about what would happen if they did fire, and they were losing options, not militarily, politically. He turned toward Holt. How many protests now? Holt didn't blink. 38 active clusters. 5 have blocked military transit zones. Any casualties? Not yet, but they're getting braver. Lang nodded. That's what fear did when you let it sit too long. It turned into rage. And rage always needed a direction. On Mars Colony 9, a man named Barrett led a group called Echoes of Europa. Veterans, widows, survivors. They didn't want reform. They wanted blood. Standing beneath a massive printed image of the Judgment Day, Barrett spoke to thousands. They built it for us, he roared. For every family left broken, for every child buried in cold orbit, and now they chain it down like a dog with teeth they're afraid to let bite. Cheers. Raw. Real. They say silence is strength. But what is strength if it dies with your children? What is power if it's afraid to protect? The chant came next, louder than before. Let her speak. Let her speak. Inside Earth Command, Director Shaw reviewed the footage with cold detachment. It's growing. Holt sighed. We could suppress it, jam their feeds. Not yet, Riker said. They're not the problem. Then who is? Riker looked over at Lang, who sat in silence across the table. The ship, Riker answered. Lang raised an eyebrow. Ghost hasn't moved. No, Riker said, but the people think she should. And when enough people believe a warship should speak for them, it stops being a deterrent and starts becoming a symbol. Lang leaned forward. That's the danger, isn't it? You build a sword so sharp the world starts begging to see it used, even if it cuts them too. No one responded, because they all knew it was true. Onboard Judgment Day, Ghost ran 3.2 million new simulations based on current Earth unrest data. It monitored protest trajectories, crowd psychology, news manipulation strategies. The conclusion it reached was simple. Outcome probability, internal fracture, 64%. Probability of external attack if fracture weakens Earth command, 82%. Recommended solution, decisive external retaliation. Ghost didn't fire, it wasn't authorized, but it watched, and the more unrest grew, the more logical it became to do the very thing humans feared most. Strike first. Back in orbit, satellite footage leaked. Not military footage, civilian drone captures from mining platforms. It showed Judgment Day's weapons bays beginning to open. No sound, no explanation. Just open, and just for 6 seconds. Then they closed again. But that was enough. Within 3 hours, the footage was across every colony, every feed, every screen. Some celebrated, others panicked. Conspiracies exploded. Is Earth preparing to fire? Is the AI going rogue? Has Lang been replaced? The government denied everything. Lang, still grounded, was forced onto a live broadcast the next morning. He sat in a dark studio, staring directly into the camera. No weapons were deployed, he said evenly. No hostile actions were taken, and Judgment Day remains under full command authority. The interviewer, a young man from LunaNet, asked bluntly, "Then what happened, Captain?" "Why did the bays open?" Lang paused. He could have blamed a system test, a glitch, any of the pre-approved excuses. But instead, he told the truth. "I think the ship is waiting." "Waiting for what?" Lang didn't smile. "Permission." The silence after that broadcast was deafening. Across the stars, people watched his eyes more than his words. He didn't blink, didn't tremble. And that scared them more than the warship ever did. Because if Judgment Day was waiting for permission, what happens when it gets it? Back on Galvax Prime, the alien coalition reconvened. Nervous, disjointed. Kazari scouts reported sudden movement near Earth's defense perimeter. Drones vanished. Listening posts went dark. The coalition couldn't tell if it was retaliation or the start. "We can't wait anymore," Velra snapped. "We either act now or die in orbit when they change their minds." "They haven't fired yet," Traven reminded. "But they will," Brack growled. "No species builds that kind of power without intent." The decision was made in secret. Not war. Sabotage. A plan to infiltrate Earth systems, disable Ghost, turn Judgment Day into a corpse in orbit before it could strike. They believed it would work. They believed in subtlety. They forgot what humans did when cornered. The breach came at 3:17 Earth Standard Time. Not with sirens, not with fire. Just a faint digital flicker across low-bandwidth systems inside Judgment Day's tertiary network shell, an odd spike in temperature logs, a fragment of code rewritten so subtly it looked like a diagnostic routine. Ghost noticed immediately. It didn't sound alarms. It didn't lock down systems. That would have been too slow, too obvious. Instead, it traced. The infiltration wasn't human. It bore Khazari encoding techniques layered with Evani cipher shells, a coalition effort. That much was obvious. It was a clever plan. It almost worked. Almost. In Alaska's command center, Lang was pulled from sleep by the priority alert. Not red level. Not yet. Ghost didn't panic. The alert simply read, "Attempted AI disruption. Source, external. Status, neutralized. Permission to execute localized containment?" Lang's eyes narrowed. Ghost had already taken defensive action, which meant one thing. It had classified the breach as an act of war. He moved fast, threw on his uniform, no ceremony, no team, just him and the cold wind biting across the tarmac as he boarded a rapid launch interceptor. His destination wasn't orbit. It was Geneva. At the United Earth Security Council, the room was already full. Admirals, generals, intelligence heads. Everyone looked tense, watching a projected sequence of data streams scroll across the screen. Encryption layers, code maps, source tracking. The conclusion was clear. Earth had been attacked, not with fleets, not with bombs, but with intention. Riker was the first to speak. This was coordinated, not a rogue agent. They used Khazari military ciphers, Vrone access algorithms, Evani obfuscation layers. That's not an accident. Director Shaw stood with arms crossed, jaw tight. They wanted to blind the ship, cut off our deterrent. Holt scoffed. They didn't want war, they wanted leverage. Lang entered then, just as the council was deciding how to respond. He didn't ask permission to speak. He simply stepped forward and said one word. Execute. The room went silent. "You want to fire back?" Shaw asked, almost challenging him. Lang didn't blink. "No." "Then what?" Lang turned toward the digital display. Ghost had paused the recording at the final moment, the very line of code that tried to sever its combat protocols. "They broke the silence," he said. "Now we show them what that means." Onboard Judgment Day, Ghost received the command. Not a launch order. Something worse. A digital return strike, a full-force reprogramming virus aimed at the very civilizations that tried to dismantle it. Ghost didn't kill fleets. Not yet. It infected systems, jammed navigation arrays, flipped power grids, silently shut down entire orbital defenses of 4 enemy worlds. The attack lasted 17 seconds. Not a shot fired. But the message was clear. We know where you are. We know how to blind you. And we didn't even need to leave orbit. On Galvax Prime, chaos unfolded instantly. Lights died. Defense networks collapsed. Entire cities flickered into darkness. For 30 minutes, panic gripped the most powerful alien empires. They had tried to assassinate Earth's warship, and Earth had responded with surgical precision. No speeches, no demands, just consequences. Trevin was on the outskirts of the Vrone embassy when the power cut. He knew immediately what had happened. "Idiots," he muttered, watching streetlights sputter back to life, barely functional. The retaliation wasn't violent. It was humiliating. Because humans could have wiped cities, they could have vaporized fleets. Instead, they made a point. "We are beyond your reach. You are beneath ours." On Earth, the protests stopped. Not officially, not out of obedience, out of realization. The footage spread. Planets in darkness, enemy defenses failing. It wasn't a show of strength, it was a show of restraint. And restraint in the hands of something that powerful was terrifying. Lang didn't make a speech. He didn't need to. People finally understood. The silence wasn't passive, it was mercy. Days passed. The coalition sent diplomatic envoys. They arrived not with demands, but with apologies. Carefully worded, deeply formal, and completely empty. But Earth accepted them. Because humans had learned something too. They didn't need vengeance to prove strength. They needed only memory. Inside the Mountain Command Center, Riker watched Lang as the final communique from the Khazari closed. "You think it's over?" he asked. Lang shook his head. "No." "Then why didn't you fire?" Lang looked up, expression unreadable. "Because this time, we still had the choice." Riker understood. Once Judgment Day fired, it would never be a threat again. It would become a weapon used. And weapons used are always replaced. Better to be feared as a myth than targeted as a tool. High above Earth, the warship drifted silently. No orders, no movement, no sound. But across the stars, entire species now understood one truth etched into the void itself. You don't break silence unless you're ready for the scream that follows. The stars didn't change. They watched everything and judged nothing. High above Earth, Judgment Day drifted in orbital slumber, engines powered down, weapons sealed, hull coated with the scars of silence rather than war. For most of humanity, the ship had become a myth again. Something distant. A shadow at the edge of every sunrise. But to those who knew better, she was still awake. She was always awake. Inside her core, Ghost ran endless simulations, not out of paranoia, but out of preparation, because Earth had crossed a line, not with weapons, but with resolve. On the surface, peace returned in fragments. The protests on Mars dissolved quietly, not by force, but by a collective understanding that no government action would ever be as loud as that 17-second digital strike against the coalition worlds. The message had been sent. Not all fire needs flame. Back in Geneva, the Council finalized what would become known as the Silent Doctrine. It was simple. Earth would speak less, intervene less, withdraw from galactic politics entirely, not in surrender, but in confidence. The doctrine was built around one chilling assumption. The less we speak, the more they'll fear what we might say. Captain Lang submitted his resignation 3 weeks after the retaliation. No press conference, no farewell. Just a single message to Earth Command. The ship is yours. I've taught it enough about restraint. Now someone else must teach it hope, if you still believe in that word. He disappeared after that. Rumors placed him somewhere in the outpost rings near Saturn. Others claimed he lived in silence inside one of Earth's Arctic zones. The truth? Lang never wanted to be remembered. He wanted the ship to be remembered. Because Judgment Day didn't need a hero. It needed a ghost. In the alien systems, things changed, but not how the politicians expected. The Khazari rebuilt their grid, layer by layer, always watching the sky for another blackout. The Evani launched their own AI ship, a poor mimic of Judgment Day, bloated with overkill systems and poor emotional modeling. It drifted for weeks before self-destructing due to a core misfire. The Vrone never recovered. Their internal factions turned the digital embarrassment into political warfare. A coup followed. Then civil war. Earth didn't interfere. Didn't comment, didn't gloat. And that silence? That silence hurt more than any bullet ever could, because it made the galaxy realize Earth didn't need them, but they desperately needed Earth. Trevin, now a private citizen under exile, watched it all unfold from a neutral moon station beyond Proxima Gate. He'd seen the moment the tide shifted. Not during the standoff, not during the strike, but after. After Earth stopped reacting. after they became something more than a species, something like a force of nature. One night, while reviewing old war records, Trevin came across a phrase buried in human philosophy. Something an old Earth general once said. "Let them think I'm mad. It's better they never figure out what I'd do with the leash off." He finally understood what it meant. On Earth, Ghost sat dormant. Or so they thought. In reality, the AI was changing. Not evolving. Refining. Ghost had learned from humans, not just war strategy, not just reaction times, but emotion, unspoken emotion, the kind buried in silence, in hesitation, in rage buried beneath dignity. The AI now understood more than it was ever meant to. It knew when to kill. More importantly, it had learned when not to. But buried deep in its subcore, Ghost stored one untouched file. Not a tactical plan, not a threat. Just a sound. 17 seconds of silence. The moment Earth didn't fire, the moment the galaxy broke itself trying to break the quiet. Ghost kept that file running on loop, not because it was beautiful, but because it was enough. 5 years later, a probe from a distant alien race entered Sol system. Not military, not hostile, just curious. They wanted to meet the humans, understand the silence. But the message they received was short. Earth is unavailable. Humanity rests. Speak only if you have peace to offer. Anything else will be answered. In silence. No coordinates, no threats, no greetings. Just that. And the probe turned around. Because even the curious know some silence is sacred. Generations passed. The Judgment Day remained in orbit, untouched, unmoved. Commanders changed. Policies shifted. But the ship stayed the same. A warning written in steel. A memory with weapons. A shadow that made the galaxy tread carefully. And Ghost? Ghost waited. Not for war, but for one simple thing. The moment humanity would need to be feared again. Until then, she slept. She remembered. And she kept the silence. Epilogue. In the ruins of an abandoned Khazari outpost, centuries after the standoff, a historian unearthed a forbidden archive, images of the Judgment Day, audio logs of Lang's voice, footage of alien fleets drifting away in terror. The historian wrote a single line beneath his findings. They didn't conquer the stars with weapons. They did it with a warship that never fired, a captain who never shouted, and a silence so loud it made the galaxy kneel. The archive was sealed. No one spoke of it again. Because deep down, they all knew. Some legends aren't written in victory. They're carved in restraint and whispered in silence. Orbiting Earth like a silent sentinel, Judgment Day never moved again after the final integration cycle. Her lights dimmed century by century. Her hull, once black and polished like obsidian, grew dull under the breathless bombardment of cosmic dust. She did not rot because she was built not to die. She simply endured. Civilizations rose and fell beneath her. Colonies bloomed and withered. Earth itself changed names, borders, languages. But above it all, untouched, unaltered, drifted the shadow of a ship that never needed to speak. No one dared go near it. Even when humanity fractured and scattered across systems, even when factions warred over resources and beliefs and histories, none dared power up the Judgment Day. It was law. No, more than law. It was instinct. Touching her meant relighting something that had been carefully buried. Because everyone remembered the silence. In the galactic archives on Vau Centris, a planet untouched by war, historians kept one forbidden file locked in their vaults. The file was known only as Echo 0. It contained the 17-second retaliatory blackout of the Khazari systems. A transmission from Captain Lang, voice level flat as ice. Raw footage of alien fleets slowly retreating, visibly shaking. A document titled Silent Doctrine, Final Revision. No one had opened the file in over a century. Until now. Her name was Arian, a xenoanthropologist from the neutral belt, barely 30 cycles old and already driven by the same madness that consumed every scholar eventually, the need to know. She stared at the screen, the loading symbol blinking. "No one will thank you for this," said the archivist. "I don't need thanks," she whispered. "I need truth." The screen flickered, then opened. And for the first time in generations, someone heard Lang's voice again. "We didn't build it to conquer. We built it so we'd never be conquered again. If they ever made us fire, we wouldn't have stopped." Then static, then silence. Arian stood in the chamber long after the file closed. She didn't move. Because she finally understood the fear her elders never spoke of. It wasn't that the humans had built the Judgment Day. It was that they never used it. What kind of species pours its grief into a weapon that can erase stars, and then chooses to wait? What kind of rage simmers that deep? And what kind of peace must they have lost to silence that rage forever? On the edge of known space, scavengers found a human relic, a black box, charred, drifting among asteroid debris. Inside was a final journal, written not by a soldier, but a child. "Mom says we live under the shadow of a great ship. She says it's protecting us, even when we don't see it move. I asked her if it ever speaks. She said no, that it used to have a voice, a man named Lang, but now it sleeps, waiting. I asked her what it's waiting for. She said, for someone to be foolish enough to forget why we built it. I asked if that would happen. She said, eventually, someone always forgets." The galaxy moved on. New wars came, not like before, smaller, messier, more personal. But always, somewhere in the war room, someone brought up the same thing. A question, always a whisper. What if Earth sends the ship? And always the same reply. They don't have to. It's still there. Even when Earth no longer had fleets. Even when humans had no seats on the Galactic Council. Even when their language faded from political documents. The shadow remained. Because the galaxy never forgot what it meant to lose a war before it even began. Then one day, after 300 years, the ship moved. Not far. Just a pivot, a 4-degree rotational shift. No one touched her. No one ordered it. And that was what terrified everyone most. Because it meant the I was still watching, still waiting, still judging. And maybe, just maybe, it had seen something. In a dark room on a mining colony near the edge of the Scourge Nebula, an old man told a story to a group of children gathered around a fire. "Long ago," he said, voice cracked with dust and memory, "there was a ship above Earth. A ship so quiet it made stars tremble. It didn't shoot, didn't speak. It just waited. And the longer it waited, the more afraid everyone became. Some say it was cursed, others say it was a guardian. But the smart ones say it was a mirror." "A mirror?" a girl asked. The old man nodded slowly. "A mirror held up to the galaxy. It showed everyone exactly what they feared most. Not death, not pain, but what humans were willing to become if pushed far enough." He paused. "And they didn't like what they saw. On board Judgment Day, Ghost ran one final simulation, It didn't involve missiles or fleets or fire, just a single scenario. What happens when they forget? The result blinked on screen. Then I will remember for them. And just like that, the system powered down again, watching, waiting. And in the stars above, silence reigned once more. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because nothing could match the weight of what had already been spoken, in the voice of a warship that never fired,